Well, thank you very much, Chair Murphy and Ranking Member Britt. This hearing really is an important reminder to all of us that the strength of our economy and the safety of our communities is directly related to our ability to keep goods flowing at our ports and our borders and keep our doors open to immigrants and refugees while stopping transnational criminal activity, especially fentanyl, that is devastating all of our communities. I really appreciate Senator Murphy's focus on this crisis, and I hope we can all join him in pushing to provide more resources to fight it, instead of putting a wrecking ball to DHS and our fight against fentanyl, like we saw the House Republican vote last week that really has a decimating effect to our budget. I actually visited the border in Arizona a few weeks ago, and I met with border officials and families that are seeking asylum in America. I heard directly about the challenges we are facing when it comes to combating human trafficking and drug trafficking and other criminal activity, and getting kids and refugees and asylum seekers the care and support they need. It's really important for us to understand that many of these families that are showing up at our border are victims and survivors. They are fleeing the violence from the same transnational criminal organizations the U.S. government is fighting. Those criminal organizations are the root cause of a lot of suffering, from the fentanyl and the drugs that are flooding our streets, to the persecution and violence and torture that leads so many refugees to flee their homes in their own countries, to the misinformation and manipulation that is fueling these atrocious trafficking operations. So if we want to protect our communities from illegal opioids and stop the dangerous human trafficking across our border and help these families who are fleeing persecution, we've got to work to shut down these cartels and the other transnational criminal organizations that are really driving so much of this devastation. And we cannot do that if we're slashing the resources we desperately need to protect our communities and stop this trafficking at our border, which is what I fear the Republicans voted for last week in the House. So I just want to remind everybody, keeping our families safe means that we fund these agencies in a way that allows us to protect our families across the border. So I appreciate both of you working on this. I want to follow up on Senator Murphy's question. He asked you, Ms. Sabatino, what the impact of a 22% cut is. Mr. Mandrick, I want to ask you the same thing. How would that affect your agency and your ability to collect and analyze intelligence?
Thank you for the question. I would certainly have a significant impact on our capability, both from a manpower and our overall functioning. We would not be able to support as heavily we do things like Operation Blue Lotus that DX Sabatino had mentioned. It would directly impact our geospatial analysis, so full motion video. One of those areas we combined work very closely with HSI on their pole cam analysis. One of those things would be impacted. Our human intelligence capability in the program would certainly suffer from any setbacks from a funding standpoint, as well as the training, development, and delivery for intelligence professionals and law enforcement professionals across the agency.
And Mr. Milholen, how will that bill affect your ability to investigate transnational TCOs? Easy.
Yeah, thank you for the question. HSI's job is grown increasingly complicated over the last several years. We're having to commit additional resources towards training, towards recruiting solid people into these fields that include cyber and financial crimes. And we need to continue to invest in our workforce. Any hindrance of that, any pullback of resources on that would significantly hamper our ability to go after transnational criminal organizations.
Okay, thank you. And let me ask you as well, you talked about China being where it starts. My assumption was India was part of that as well, correct?
We see a small amount of precursor chemicals that are coming into Mexico from India, but our diplomatic relations and our law enforcement relations there are pretty strong, so we've had a lot of success with them stopping that.
Okay, how do you work with other agencies and international parties to stop the flow of these precursor chemicals before they come and are used to manufacture fentanyl?
Yes, ma'am. Our main resource outside the United States are our strong partnerships with foreign governments, with law enforcement in those countries. We have about 14 transnational criminal investigative units around the world. We're trying to expand that program as we go forward. These are vetted law enforcement officers from that host country that we train at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in the United States, and they go back to the country they're from. They embed with HSI agents in that country, and the thing that makes them the most unique is we work investigations of joint interest. We don't just ask them to find someone who may have a warrant in the United States to extradite back to the United States. We're fine if they prosecute in their home country or if we prosecute it in the United States, and this is a way we build partnerships for the future.
Okay, and really quickly, I'm really glad that you've rolled out these non-intrusive inspection tools so we can more identify some of this contraband at our ports of entry. Do you have the resources to scale that up?
HSI is closely tracking CBP's rollout of non-intrusive inspection. As we respond to every single seizure made at a port of entry that CBP makes, and we handle the follow-up investigation from that seizure,
Yep.
As they roll out non-intrusive inspection, we can only assume that seizures will go up, which means we'll take additional response from HSI to handle those investigations and will require additional resources.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.